Item number one on the agenda is House Bill 299, Elector Amendments, with Representative King. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've learned through sad experience that it's not wise to ever refer to these as simple bills. And this is not a simple bill, but it is a straightforward bill. I can say that. I appeared before this committee last year during the session. This was a bill that, in its current form, it's a little bit modified last year, and I'll explain the difference between last year and this year in a second. But basically, it came to you late in the session last year. It may have been in the very last committee meeting that you had. And so there were some questions, and it wasn't really fair to ask you to pass it out then. So I've talked to other people since then, done a little bit of work on it. The difference between this bill and last year's bill is that in the very last sentence, last line, line 125, the previous version of the bill had class, or rather third-degree felony as opposed to Class A misdemeanor. We changed that. We backed that off to Class A misdemeanor as a penalty. The nature of this bill is that when you have a slate of electors that are chosen by the political parties to go act as electors for purposes of the Electoral College, they cast their vote for the President and Vice President of the United States. The bill, current law, makes it clear that each party shall choose their slate of electors. Now, we've been fortunate from the perspective of how the statute is worded that we've never had a situation where there hasn't been a president of the United States elected by other than one of the major parties. And I try to address that a little bit here in the sense that we're changing the bill to talking about an elector who casts an electoral ballot for a person, changing the words "not nominated by the party of which he is an elector" to "other than a candidate for president or vice president of the United States." I think that's a good change in light of the fact that it is possible. We had most recently a third-party challenger, Ross Perot.
Can you give us the lines you were referring to right
there? Yes, I'm sorry. Lines 119 and 120 talk about the fact that under current law, we have 119 and 120 rather. Under current law, the elector has an obligation to cast an electoral ballot for a person who is nominated by the party of which he is an elector. Well, if you have a third person, if Ross Perot had won the election in 1992, I think it was, we would have had a problem under the current statutory language. So we make a correction there by saying the electors have to cast their ballot for the individual who received the majority vote of the state. And as I say, if Ross Perot had won the majority vote of the state of Utah in 1992, we wouldn't have had the ability to cast an electoral vote for him. That's a problem in my mind because the electors should be casting their votes for the individual who wins the popular vote of the state of Utah. The other thing that the bill does is to say that there is a penalty involved. There is an inducement, a punishment provided for individual electors who are faithless. These kind of faithless elector bills, electors aren't commonly faithless, but there have been over a dozen instances in the history of the country where an elector went in and cast a ballot for someone that everybody acknowledged they shouldn't have been casting a ballot for.
That's interesting. I was going to ask that question.
Yeah, no, it's happened. It's not happened that I'm aware of in the history of Utah, but it's happened 15 to 20 times in the history of the country. We don't want that to happen. Now, it is true that even under current law, if an individual tries to do that, their vote is disallowed and not recorded. And so, we've taken action in the statute to say, hey, you can't have an effective vote for someone other than who your slate of president and vice president nominees are. I think the virtue in adding a criminal penalty is we want to make sure that individuals who are charged with acting as fiduciaries on behalf of the residents, the citizens of the state of Utah, take that seriously and that there is a punishment affixed for them not doing so. The electors are not elected by the people. They're not answerable to anyone other than the officials in the particular parties which choose them right now to any misconduct if they happen to choose somebody to do something other than what they want. I think that's a problem, potentially at least. And so I think it's a good idea that the electors who are otherwise not answerable for their conduct be answerable in the form of being charged with a misdemeanor if they don't cast their ballot in the way that the residents, the citizens of the state of Utah have said they should cast their ballot. So it's relatively straightforward. There are some interesting little angles to it. There's some, what I think the bill does is update some archaic language, quite honestly, in the statute today, as well as provide that criminal penalty. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Representative. Are there questions from the committee?